For as long as I can remember, every layer of the gaming community at large has always had a dream game, games that simply do not exist. For a majority of your general video game consumer, the dream game is something like a Grand Theft Auto title with the ability to do anything and customize everything at all times. Worlds like this, at least from my perspective, seem virtually impossible to craft, and I suppose one can only hope that Rockstar has something cool cooking up in the background for Grand Theft Auto 6 with all that money they have. See, GTA for a while has veered off into the RPG camp for quite some time now. Most players don't even realize what they want are RPG titles, and that if GTA 6 creeps into that dream game territory, an RPG will be exactly what they get. A few titles that attempted to bridge the gap between general consumer all the way to the inner circles of the gaming community are the latest Bethesda RPG titles. Many, myself included, would probably call these more conventional RPG titles. However, as time has passed and we all mature and the industry grows, I can't help but feel like Bethesda hasn't made any meaningful innovation or adjustments to modernize their titles outside of streamlining the game systems for general consumers to easier understand, i.e. dumbing the RPG down. Don't get it twisted though, the worlds they craft are spectacular, but it seems as if Bethesda has lost their soul in recent titles that set them apart from the rest with games like Oblivion and Fallout 3. So where does that leave Cyberpunk 2077? I'm sure in the months to come you'll see much discussion around if Starfield or Cyberpunk is better, and then as time moves forward, the discussion will eventually evolve to Cyberpunk versus all other RPGs at large. The more people who get their hands on Cyberpunk 2077, the larger this bubble is going to grow, and it will eventually reach critical mass until some other RPG comes along or the sequel comes, either giving us a new balloon with space for more air, or popping and ruining the Cyberpunk name for the indefinite future. So, how does Cyberpunk actually hold up to other RPGs? Well, I can say with utter confidence that Cyberpunk 2077, as of September 26, 2023, will go down as one of the most remarkable RPGs of all time. Against all odds, the comeback has been glorious, for lack of a better term. But moreover, the competition is stiff against the likes of the massively critically and commercially acclaimed Elder Scrolls and Souls franchises. To the more niche Disco Elysium and now seemingly long-forgotten Mass Effect trilogy, none of the aforementioned games are actually that small or niche, rather than when stood up against the hype in the lead-up to the launch and now the discourse surrounding 2077, it is important to properly respect these lanes of thinking. The hype was massive, potentially the most hyped game of all time, and the discourse was larger than life, quite literally inescapable. But again, against all odds, CD Projekt Red prevailed. There is a long, detailed history, and history is often told in the blood spilt, and there sure was a lot of blood spilt. CD Projekt Red was too soon thought to be a one-trick wonder with The Witcher 3, one of the most highly acclaimed games I have ever seen, and for a damn good reason. They had proven they had what it takes to stand atop the insurmountable peak that is the RPG genre, which leads us to the hype around Cyberpunk, with a whole array of overpromising in the marketing and a previous title that took the world by storm. It was only natural that the gaming community at large would start to swell with excitement. But when that time came, CD Projekt Red failed to deliver across all fronts. Downright misleading advertisement, hollow false promises, walked-back scope of the game from previous trailers, extremely poor performance on last-gen and current-gen, and it hardly ran on high-end PCs, missing features, the fact it wasn't even an RPG, and bugs across the board that would make even the most dedicated players write the game off as a total failure. Things got so bad that PlayStation themselves removed the game from the storefront and were offering refunds. That's a fuck up you have to intentionally make. CDPR was on fire, inside and out. The crunch and insane scope creep, their approach to bug fixing, etc. I could talk all day about the disaster that surrounds the title, but that's not what I'm here for. What I'm here for is to tell you that CD Projekt Red stuck with their gut and began to work on frugally walking the line back towards the time before they left those promises to the wayside. Cyberpunk was never a bad game per se, but more so that it had an array of problems and broken promises that left players feeling hollow. And it also really wasn't an RPG like they advertised it. If you're one of the few players that stuck with Cyberpunk and finished a full playthrough, you'll know that the story, the world, the writing, the music, and again, most importantly, the world are anything but bad. The real problems come from everything, and I mean everything else. In the lead up to 2.0, released on the 21st of September 2023, the game was receiving major quality of life updates every so often. However, when the 21st arrived of September 2023, the world was once again shown that CDPR knows how to make a dang good RPG. And make a dang good RPG they did. They overhauled everything. From combat, extra quests, new items, secrets, a totally revamped build system to make it an actual RPG, and in turn new combat. The new dialogue options are great, increased performance, and a whole array of new features initially promised, as well as the new standout expansion that provides an extremely tight and well-crafted experience that can only be found in Cyberpunk 2077. That being said, the Walls of Illusion have been completely rebuilt for Cyberpunk 2077 to once again fully immerse you in the game's story and world, something most games could only dream of doing once, but 2077 manages to do twice. This is my third full playthrough of the game, with many more hours messing about in the world, and 2077 has managed to reignite that fire and desire to want to even be immersed in the world, long after the illusion of immersion should have faded, long after I know the story, long after I know the world, all because of a team not just dedicated to getting it right for the players, but talented enough to craft such a diverse and immersive experience across all fronts. Granted, it took some time to get there, but oh man, am I glad that we finally got there. Okay, so kind of rapid fire performance review here. So it's no secret that 2077 ran like molten ass on release. The infamous last-gen console release of the game will go down as one of the buggiest, most unplayable messes to be released from a AAA dev in gaming history. There are whole YouTube channels dedicated to just cataloging the bugs from 2077 on launch. The only time I've ever seen something like that was when Joseph Anderson made a 3-hour video showing just a peek at how many and how crazy the bugs were in Fallout 76. I mean, they really messed up really bad with the performance and stability of the title on launch. The performance and stability is actually the most damning thing they did. It's the real true soul killer here, if you get what I'm getting at. Ask any person you know what they think about Cyberpunk, and it'll probably be one of a couple of things, but most likely that one thing is going to be them ruminating over the fact that the performance simply made the game wholly unplayable to them. Fast forward to 2.0, and the game's stability and performance has completely skyrocketed. There's a whole suite of advanced options for performance and settings, so much so that players will spend more time Googling while tinkering than actually running benchmarks, because what the heck does this all mean? Trust me, there is a staggering amount of ways to optimize this game for your system, so if you're on low or high-end hardware, there is a setting preference for everyone. It still takes a fair amount of power to push into the higher, more stable levels of frames, and especially the triple-digit frames on PC, but I'm hearing report from many others that the game actually runs on current-gen consoles. Surprising. Notice how I didn't mention last-gen consoles, though. To put it bluntly, CDPR is not supporting the last-gen console release of the game anymore, and I think that's a move they had to make for the future of the title, one for the better. The new zones and what they are trying to achieve with performance simply cannot be made possible on the last-gen hardware. That being said, I played the game on PC with a 4070 Ti and a Ryzen 5 5600. No ray tracing, damn near max settings, and it ran pretty damn good for the supposed best-looking game of all time. And that claim has miles of receipts to back it up. 2077 looks incredible. We will talk more about how it looks in a moment when I discuss the world, but for a game that has virtually no loading screens and a seamless open world, it runs really well after all this time, and I mean it better because this is the treatment players deserved all along. I've also spoken to a few friends, and they as well are having massive increase in stability from when they previously played. Huge increases in performance when ray tracing is enabled is a really big thing, but I haven't had the chance to speak to anybody about path tracing. I do have access to ray reconstruction, and it's seriously impressive. However, I wanted my 100 plus FPS, so I played with ray tracing off. Plus, you need a nice CPU to utilize ray reconstruction for its performance increase, so, you know, didn't really tap into any of that. Path tracing is also only available on 40 series GPUs, but DLSS 3.5 is a whole other story. As long as you have an RTX enabled card, you can utilize ray reconstruction. A whole other array of powerful options are available, but I think I'll let the boys over at Digital Foundry speak on this, as I probably have already said something dumb about performance, as it's not really my forte. However, crashes. I ran into a whole lot of crashes on my playthrough. Sadly, the crashes were tied to throwing knives, which is what my build was. I wanted to use the new weapon type throwing knives, and whenever I got a kill under certain circumstances, it would crash my game. Shitty when it's really difficult to pinpoint exactly what circumstances those were, so if it occurred, I would have just avoided using my knife for the rest of the combat. It didn't completely hinder my experience, and it was somewhat tolerable, though almost every time it crashed, it ruined my footage, so if it seems a little choppy or like there might be some audio desync, I apologize. There is an incredible section in Skillup's review of Elden Ring where he discusses how the geography of the lands between is the incredible foundation of which the outstanding level design in Elden Ring is built upon. I really urge you to go watch that review again, as not only is it really good, but he mentions how the topography and how the world is laid out in these vast fields or mountainous regions, and they are all done so extremely deliberately. But how does the level design and the world in a game like Elden Ring translate to something like Cyberpunk's Night City? I mean, it's literally a city. Let me explain. Cyberpunk, from the very moment you start the game, drip feeds you mechanics and ideas of how you can and cannot interact with it. They aren't setting you up to break any boundaries here, but they are setting ones that are very specific, very deliberate, and very different from any game before it. It won't make much sense unless you have played the game before, but the fact that you can take calls in your head in the middle of anything is huge, and that's just one thing. Matter of fact, it's probably the biggest barrier of disbelief the player has to dismiss early on, and that's why the game literally opens with it. Moving forwards, it shows that technology really has advanced, and you will see all kinds of mind-boggling things really warping your sense of what's possible in this world, but again, all done intentionally to set you up to learn how to interact with the world, the characters, and all the while you are learning its extremely, and I mean really deeply rich lore. There is a whole lifetime's worth of discussions to be had and knowledge to be shared when referring to level design and world design in games, so you'll just have to take my word that they really don't pull their punches here. That being said, a lot of what they have boils down to show, don't tell. So again, the level design in Night City was very deliberately handcrafted around a few key goals that kind of low-key all boil down to one term: player agency. It's pretty obvious that if you took 10 random people and sat them down to play a game, they would all want to play the game in their own way, mostly separate from one another's playstyle. I would also wager that their immersion would differ immensely depending on the systems that are built for each player and their individual style of play. If you are someone who likes to fast travel everywhere, you would want fast travel terminals in convenient locations, and I'd also wager that you are more of an objective or story focused player. Here, they have you covered. If you are okay with driving everywhere, you might want to spend extra money on the nice cars in the game. Hell, you might even take the long way around town every single time just to see your favorite location in the reign of the night. This is what player agency means, but Cyberpunk's agency goes much deeper than what's on display in most conventional RPGs. It also delves into the combat and dialogue sections of the game with player agency. While they have a massive list of dialogue choices and how the game can play out depending on how your decisions and actions affect everything, this also turns into how the combat actually affects the way that you are going to play the game. And again, all of this derives from player agency because you are making each individual choice. CDPR are no joke when it comes to creating immersive worlds. They really know what they're doing, but even more so than what they did with The Witcher 3, Cyberpunk 2077 achieved a semi-synchronous world that dynamically molds itself around the player and their agency. Surprise, surprise, it being an RPG is where the core DNA of this game has always lied. The DNA was always there, but it took a little fine-tuning of the systems to really bring it out and get it right. Hacking doors to open them with your technical ability or intelligence, actually, I don't really know. I'm not a netrunner gonk. I used my quick wits and cool persona to weasel my way past enemies. And that's what I mean. Every building in this game you enter, every quest or encounter has something to ensure the player feels like their choices have consequences, that be it good or bad. Some missions and gigs are far more suited for one playstyle or build, but that doesn't mean other ones can't succeed as well. This goes doubly so for the story missions of the game. There are a staggering amount of ways the story can evolve in this game, though the choices you make, the builds you utilize, etc., you will see ripple effects everywhere. That's not to say that some storylines in this game aren't set in stone though, as they most certainly are, which is a good or bad thing depending on what your opinions are, but what I'm trying to convey to you is that remember the dream game that we spoke of at the start of the video? Cyberpunk 27 is most certainly veering into dream game territory here, more than any game before it, and it's something that has to be experienced firsthand to truly be understood and appreciated. So level design and choices are one thing, but what about the actual world we find ourselves playing in? Well, the game is set in, if you could suspend your disbelief for but a moment, 2077. Imagine that. And you play as V. V is a merc who recently found her or himself a new set of pants, a new lease on life, if you will. Together with their partner Jackie, they desire to set out into this top-down run, problem-riddled city to make a name for themselves. The dream of every new or veteran merc is to become a Night City legend like Morgan Blackhand or even Johnny Silverhand. Night City isn't supposed to be a kind place though. It's rampant with drugs, disease, and poverty, gangs, and violence, alongside your obviously corrupt politicians and overhanging overlords, hanging over your head and watching you at all times. And that's not even nearing the closest to the horrors you're going to see from gangs like the Scavengers, who harvest cybernetic implants from people they find in the streets. It's a dirty world and even dirtier people. But Cyberpunk comes with a clear message on top of all of this, one that I can't quite spell out for you without spoiling too much, but the light in the dark is often the people you meet and the people you get to interact with. Judy, Panam, Victor, Jackie, etc. are all characters you run into on your path of destruction through Night City. These characters do more than act as a guiding light. They outright steal the show while deepening the rich lore, all while they teach you the new things in gameplay and abroad with every line of dialogue, every flicker of the eyes as they scoff. I mean, the facial animations here are second to none, and they really deepen what's possible with a story-driven, open-world exploration game, especially after the touch-ups they did in 2.0. Speaking of characters, it's hard not to love V, your player character. Harder, even more so, to not become so emotionally invested in the journey of these other characters who, main or side story, have their own moments and their own identity that would rival some of the best acting you would see in mainstay Hollywood films like Inception or Prisoners. The acting and voice acting on display here is some of the best in the industry, and there isn't a moment that will go by where you won't feel the same. In the recent updates, they even upgraded the facial animations and some of the voice work and eye movement work, really elevating some characters to a whole new level, such as Evelyn or Panam. The new gold standard for in-engine cutscenes in gaming has been set, truly, and for years this will be called back to prove that Cyberpunk always had at least a little bit of heart, even from the beginning. Some of the emotional beats in this game are just, man, they're gruesome. Without going into spoiler territory, though the game has been out for 3 years, so I don't really know what you want me to say, V, your main player character, is dying, a painful and horrifying death. In a dream job gone wrong, and through one reason or another, V ends up sick with Keanu Reeves' character, Johnny Silverhand, as a cyber ghost stuck in their head. Johnny was on a relic shard, a shard that supposedly grants immortality to those who can afford its ungodly price, by ways of which I'm not going to discuss here. This leads to Johnny's consciousness beginning to overwrite the consciousness of V. V will inevitably, with the passage of time, and there's not much of that, become Johnny Silverhand. That is, if they don't catch a stray bullet or somehow die on the other way before then. Again, no spoilers, but the main story has this real lack of urgency considering that you, the main character, is dying. Thankfully, in the Phantom Liberty DLC, they really crank up the level of urgency and they absolutely nail the pacing. There is a lot of main story and side content alike that has so much left to untangle before and after diving into it. And I really like the main story here. Its final message is one that's not talked about often, and the whole game seems like a metaphor that is something really personal to me. Loved this. That being said, some of the side content isn't that great, but will almost never fail to impress you in one way or another. Only on my third playthrough of the game did I finally find the El Decado's questline pretty dull, but that's because I have to travel so dang far out of my way to go do it, and it just has one of those god-awful turret segments that just leave a bad taste in my mouth. However, I still almost love all of the quests and gigs here. Even small missions like the gigs, see to it you are always having fun and seeing something new and interesting. There is this one time I came across this guy and he got a Mr. Stud sex implant, something you see on the billboards plastered all over the place. He needed this to make his Mr. Man a little better. It malfunctioned while he was using it, and now he's begging you to get in a car and drive him to a Ripper dock to have it fixed. Or how about the time I got a spam likely text saying I won a free car, and I won a free car. This one's tied to the DLC and pre-ordering. It's pretty cool. So much that brings this world to life, all the while endlessly entertaining you. You can never quite expect what you'll find in Night City, man. And I haven't even begun to talk about how pretty the game looks or sounds, which is truly next gen. It is not up for question that Night City is one of the best looking locations in all of video games, if not the best. Every little fine detail of the world extends past those diverse dialogue trees and decisions the players can make that I spoke of. The trash on the street, the vending machines in each district and what they sell, what people wear, the difference in cleanliness in each district and what cars they drive in said district, what kind of music the enemies listen to depending on their faction. It goes really deep. They took a lot of care for this world. It's so detailed and lived in that I can't really pick a point or topic to really start on when discussing this. But when talking about beauty in Night City in details, it's impossible to go without mentioning the rainy nighttime inside the city. There is nothing, and I mean nothing in all of gaming, quite like the rainy streets of Night City that emanate a soft but vibrant glow of the neon-filled skyline. I have said for quite some time now that Cyberpunk is the only true next-gen title, and I meant it for a while. Sure, now we have a few amazing standout AAA first-party PlayStation titles like Spider-Man 2 and God of War Ragnarok, but are they really pushing the boundaries visually as well in the gameplay department? I can't say, as I don't have a PlayStation 5, just an FYI, but I would wager that they don't. So the game is pretty, the world is rich with lore and diverse settings and characters, but what about how the game actually plays? For starters, you create your character and choose their life path, that being Nomad, Street Kid, or the Chad Corpo. After this, you are plopped into the game and fed bits of information as you progress through the tutorial intro. The intro is fairly lengthy, but it works great as a tool to introduce the player to the elements and rules of the systems that the developers have built for you to interact with. For example, again, everyone has cybernetic implants. It's the future. You don't quite have the superpowers of late game yet, so when you make decisions on how you want to play in combat and affect missions through your decisions of builds and seeing how they affect dialogue trees early on, it's all spaced deliberately to guide you to play how you want to play, to build how you want to play, but more importantly, learn how the systems at play work here. I went reflex cool for my skills and perks, so pretty early on, since I wasn't leveling my intelligence or technical prowess, I lost the ability to hack doors or computers to get shortcuts or special information, or make sure I wasn't getting played by others when it came to technology-based discussion when like bartering or trying to argue for hostages or something. But in turn, I get to use my quick wits and cool demeanor to play things up or down or catch slip-ups of the tongue or poor eye contact. There is a place for everything here in this game, and a playstyle for everyone. It, however, used to not really be this way. With 2.0 came the overhauled skill trees, amongst many other gameplay changes, but let's focus on the skill trees for now. The way skill trees are set up is to entice the player to get to role-playing immediately, because again, it's a role-playing game, an RPG. At first glance, you can see that if you want to be fluent in technobabble and a hacker, you know the exact trees that you want, intelligence and technical ability. Same goes with being a tanky, nothing stands in my way type of player, or maybe you want to be an all-rounder, able to adapt to any situation on the fly. There are a ton of ways to take this, and they ensure you are allowed to experiment and take it at your own pace even if you like. Pretty early on in each skill tree, you will see the impacts you have on dialogue options and get to access some pretty fun and nasty perks early on. Nasty for anyone foolish enough to get in your way, that is. Eventually, you'll find yourself solidifying what you want from the perks and the trees, finding your favorite weapons if you want to be stealthy or go guns loud and dominate your opponents on the front line. There really are a daunting amount of builds and variety in this game, and with the way iconic weapons act, new iconic weapons legitimately create new build variety with overhauled mechanics. They feel similar to Destiny exotics and the direction they are taking their builds, and I don't say that lightly. Destiny is kind of a great game with greater potential, but these systems feel more at place in Cyberpunk than Destiny's new lackluster build crafting systems, and it really shows when you get into that higher level of play in Cyberpunk. There are a whole array of mechanical keywords here to play around with as well. Dismemberment, bleed, critical hit, shock, burn, grab, throw, dashing, time slowing, crouched, cover, mitigation. It really goes on, and some are wholly exclusive to certain trees. Better yet, since 2.0, the levels of enemies now scale to the player, meaning the developers are able to lean into individual encounter design. This is amazing for a variety of reasons. Since the only real hurdle for difficulty is the player's ability to overcome the obstacle through their own builds and decisions, it allows the developers to handcraft encounters to be challenging, but more importantly, unique and intuitive in their design, something we sorely lacked in the main game. Furthermore, they limit how chromed out you can get. I mean, like how many cybernetics you can install. Being able to equip cybernetics is now tied to your level and a few sparse perks in the techie-like trees. An extremely welcome change, as before you could get very strong very quickly through iconic tiered items and cybernetics, and it made the game a bore and even incentivized bad play styles and habits for the player that really took the soul out of the game. The overhauled progression was clearly something that had to happen, and when they overhauled the other systems, it just could have been left to the wayside, something that they didn't mess up on, but they really nailed it here, and I'm impressed. It felt smooth and felt good, which RPGs are notoriously poorly balanced and paced, but they really got it right here. There is, however, a few complaints I have. Armor in the game has green or red triangles in the corners of their icons, determining if something is better or worse, but I don't quite see a difference between any one piece from another piece, not at least until much later in the game, when it's significantly more common to see armor with extra stats on it, like plus 25 armor. Most items in the game don't have this until they turn into legendaries. Pretty weird thing. Not a huge problem by any means, it was just really confusing early on. Speaking of armor, the transmog system has been in the game for a while now, but it's one of the best quality of life features I could imagine for a game like Cyberpunk, doubly so when you can access your stash from the trunk of any vehicle you own. But your transmog is sometimes often overwritten by like having to wear outfits. It's a weird thing. All of this goes hand in hand with the new incredibly well polished driving mechanics too. Driving mechanics are not easy to get in any game, as there is a fine line that needs to be ridden between arcadey slidiness and the weighty realism of vehicle, but they got it right here. I'm very glad to say there wasn't a single vehicle in Cyberpunk that I drove that I didn't like. They all felt fluid and responsive with their own weight and style. New response curves and handling, new engine sounds, and of course they look incredible. And I played on mouse and keyboard. Driving on mouse and keyboard is supposed to suck, and it didn't. And man, I was thoroughly impressed with this across the board. It was good. The new combat and police chases in vehicles feel pretty alright too. It feels a little dry, but this seems like the first, maybe second real iteration of this system, and a little tweaking could take it an extremely long way. That being said, I didn't invest into any vehicle combat perks, and I even found myself just wanting to leave vehicles to shoot at my enemies, but that's also coming from the guy who got out of vehicles in Halo to shoot enemies, so I guess I'm just weird. I don't know. I can accept being weird. I'm okay with being weird. Hey, remember buying vehicles in the base game? That really sucked, didn't it? It was really bad. Trust me, if you're one of those who didn't play the game at launch and went to buy vehicles, be glad it's changed. Now there are stations around the city you can buy them at. More become available as you progress through the story and earn street cred, and some are locked behind quests and tasks you must complete for certain fixers. So I guess now it's time to talk strictly about some negatives. First off on my list, again, the crashes are a real problem. Still, I didn't have that many, but when my whole build is based around throwing knives and movement, makes it pretty annoying that my build makes the game crash, something that will obviously get fixed eventually, but doesn't change the fact that if I got this many times, I mean, I counted, it was like 10 plus crashes sometimes within like an hour. It was really weird. Now, I know it sounds weird to say, but only on certain missions did it really crash a lot, and then I wouldn't have any problems. Then back to certain missions, only in certain rooms, in certain areas, against certain enemies, under certain conditions, would it crash the game. Whenever I killed a robot after using Sandevistan to slow time, and then double jumping, and then air dashing, and then getting a kill when it was a crit, that's when it would crash my game. So yeah, a real momentum killer, a real immersion breaker of a problem, but it's not the end of the world. The other complaint I have, apartments suck. I guess they are cool to spend money on, but since you are able to wait in any location as long as you aren't in a key moment or in combat, apartments serve literally no purpose, as you can just call your vehicle to stash all of your items that you don't want to carry around. I'm a little confused here as to why they even exist. Like, I really don't know, but they look pretty at least, I guess. Okay, so here's a weird one. Having to wait for X character to contact you. So let's say you complete a mission and now you just gotta wait for Judy to contact you to complete her quest line. You know, you have to go back to your house, or you have to sit in place and then sit there, and you just have to wait 24 hours, and sometimes you have to wait multiple days, and this doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel good at all. I feel this one will mostly only affect players who are trying to make a beeline to the end of the main stories, as it's supposed to encourage you to go out and do gigs and side missions. I would say it works very, very well to usher players towards other activities and explore the world. Really, really, really well, in fact. But if you are someone who wants to push on with the narrative after a key moment, just because you want to carry emotional momentum forwards, this can be a big killer. Just thought I'd point it out. Another major problem I found was bosses being great, which I know sounds weird, but they're very, very seldom. They are so good. I mean, really, really good at times. I'm a huge boss guy in video games. I love them, but they aren't really around very much. I like the hype that surrounds them. I like the hype that builds up to them, or when they just come out of nowhere. Bosses are great in all variety. Cyberpunk has great bosses, but not very many of them. This is something that the sequel will clearly change, and if you play the DLC, you plan on playing the DLC, you will definitely see that they also change for the better. So just a little nitpick. I would say that the 2.0 changes, which I only brushed up on, are incredible changes for the better for the game. Hell, I hardly even talked about any real main mechanics. I only brushed up on a small of them as well. And I was just talking for 10 minutes. It may as well be a whole new video game. The guns feel better, the perks and build diversity, the changes to driving, the updated facial animations, the music. Oh man, I haven't even touched on the music. There is simply too much to discuss here. But the biggest takeaway is now that Cyberpunk 2077 has really elevated its most important parts of its foundation, the player agency. The ability to choose how you want to play in combat is basically the best thing they could have ever done for this game, really honing in on what matters to players to lean into that role-playing fantasy with a whole new level of polish, a whole new array of playstyles, a whole new suite of items, perks, etc. There is so much more that has been added to Cyberpunk 2.0, and it does not matter how smart or how talented you are. I really could not fold it all into a nice little outro paragraph, or even let alone a single video. It's simply not something I'm smart enough or talented enough to do, and I don't got the time for that. Just take my word, there is a lot going on behind the scenes here. But what I can leave you with is a confident and sure assessment, and maybe a little thought-provoking ideas here. Like at the start of the video, I mentioned that Cyberpunk 2077 has grown into itself, finally turning into a game that we all wanted, but more importantly, deserved all along. The players deserved so much more than what we got at launch. A complete and utter disaster. And I don't know, maybe you see it as an attempt to save face and restore faith for the players. I see it as an attempt to truly deliver on one of the greatest visions a studio has ever set out to craft. The world of Cyberpunk isn't a kind one in the slightest, and it was more than ironic to see the corporate end of CDPR push their thumb down and release a messy product for us players, with the core of Cyberpunk 2077 being around anti-corporate rhetoric. Irony in the discourse around 2077 be damned, they fucking did it. The dream game we always wanted still doesn't exist, but you would be out of your fucking mind to skip this one. The closest we have and will ever get for many, many years to come for that dream game is right here and ready for us to play. And we haven't even talked about the explosive swan song, the banger of an ending to all this, that is the Phantom Liberty DLC. It's good, it also deserves your money. That being said, Cyberpunk 2077 and his DLC is a must-play from MetaSalt. But before you go, let me leave you with a little more food for thought. Think back to those E3 trailers where they promised full day-night cycles and handcrafted behavior for NPC in Night City. Really think about it. Cyberpunk 2077 isn't the grandiose title from the E3 trailers back in 2018, but it sure is one damn good RPG now. So much so, I personally believe the discourse around 2077 will be less focused on the extreme pessimism surrounding the title, but more so the optimism and how 2077, with CDPR finding their footing for potentially the start of one of the best RPG franchises in not just the coming years, but of all time.
That's impossible. Where did you get this biochip?
Got him. 6th Street away from
Listen to me, for fuck's sake!
The moon. In her light, what was once far away and difficult to grasp becomes sharp and clear.
Alright, so, yeah. Okay, that was a thing. That was, 34 minutes. Jesus. If you liked it, go ahead, like, and subscribe. You know the deal. These things take a long time to make. Since the DLC dropped 5 p.m. Monday, I have been working around the clock while also working a job. Not even trying to have a social life just to get this out. All the support is appreciated, and I really thank you for even getting this far. Thank you, and I hope you have a good day.